And we'll talk about our last topic of the night, which is this new isolytic damage, which you can now see in your battle logs. Currently, it's going to be 0 for everybody. They did give us a handy dandy little graphic, which I'll also pull up here in just a second. This is a little big. Let's see. That's what she said. Let's see what we can do to zoom out of that a little bit. There we go. No. What happened? There we go. Okay. I did not talk about the officers yet. To be honest, I completely forgot about them. So we'll add those at the end if there's time. We'll go officers for our fourth topic. All right. So here's your new isolytic damage. And they make this example about if you have a wooden shield and someone shoots an arrow at you, well, the shield absorbs the arrow. But then the arrow releases like radiation or something, and then that goes through the shield and does extra damage to the person, unless you got a special shield. Okay, that's a decent analogy. You could have said a poison gas cloud or something other than radiation, but if you're going to use medieval weaponry, let's be accurate. So, isolytic damage is not affected by your standard dodge, shield deflection, or armor at all. Essentially, that damage is split off at the beginning of the fight. So if you were going to hit for 100 damage with whatever your little Rialta is going to shoot him for 100, but you've got 5% isolytic damage. So 5% is going to get split off. That 95 that's left is then going to go through the standard process where it gets absorbed by shield deflection, mitigation, all that kind of stuff. Okay, they mitigated 50% of it. Now you're down to 47 damage. Of that 47 that's left, 80% gets absorbed by the shield. The other 20% goes through to the hull of the ship. The isolytic damage, that 5 that you shot right off the bat, skips mitigation. Now you get to shields, which absorb 80% of it. That's the 4. And then the rest goes to the hull, which is that 1 that's left. So it's a new damage type that completely skips the standard forms of mitigation and goes straight through to shield reduction before then also applying hull damage. And it follows that standard 80-20 split still. Now, there will be new researches and artifacts and things that increase the amount of what your damage is that's isolytic. Everybody starts at 0 right now. Nobody has any isolytic damage. Nobody has any isolytic defense. Which is why you'll see in your battle logs, isolytic damage, 0. Isolytic mitigation, 0. Because nobody has anything that blocks any of that stuff. If we go into our new artifacts, we've got a couple of new ones here. We've got our dual generators, Borg Queen remains, and Malkothian spirits. These start doing, so the Queen's remains, this is boosting your isolytic damage for all ships, starting at 1%. Dual generators here increases your defense 5% per level, and this one increases your damage against armadas. We look at some of these and how they scale up, again, fairly slowly. So they're not letting you split off a large percentage of that damage right away. Now there are other artifacts that also do this and stuff like this. And this one does seem to be adding more defense. So whatever that portion of damage that's split off, that skips your dodge, your shield deflection, having isolytic defense would then lower that damage further before it hits your shields. There are 3 new epics. there are 3 new rares. The rares increase your damage against specific ship types. These increase it just sort of across the board. And then you down here, you've got the uncommons. One of these you can get for free this month through the event store. Actually, you'll get it this week through the event store. You'll get it unlocked for free. This all requires you to be using a specific type of ship and having the right combat ability, we'll call it. Burning, hull breach, or morale, based on the type of ship that you're on, in order to trigger those. So it's an interesting concept. You also see here now, here's your Isolytic artifact tokens. And here's your Isolytic artifact restoration, which is a limited time offer, huh? Looks like one chest costs 4,200 of these things. It's a smaller pool for sure. I also noticed that some of these seem to be missing stuff. Where's the third epic? That's not there. There's a couple more rares I guess I missed. Riker's trombone. Okay, yeah, you also have a couple other rares here that are also boosting Isolytic defenses based on your ship type. So there's like 6 or 7 rares, but dual generators is not available in the conversion pack. That's interesting. How are we supposed to get that one then? At first thought it would. At first, I thought it would be true damage, but of course they couldn't make it that easy. No, no, no. They couldn't just have it be, hey, look, this is undefendable damage, because obviously, you know, as you progress these things and get that damage level up, you know, if you get 10% from the Borg Queen, plus if you're fighting against an Explorer and you add another 10% here, now you're just got 20% of unblocked damage, you know, or unmitigated damage. And then you go down here and then you add more, probably another 10%, right, from one of these artifacts. 8%. So they can't just be like, yeah, you've got 28% of the damage that just completely bypasses standard mitigation. It's like, no, we kind of had to introduce a new mechanic that we can then build on for the next 2 or 3 years. And obviously, isolytic damage and isolytic defenses will probably be what they add to a lot of new officers for a while, or new effects for a while, since they can't. We already have enough other officers that add to shield penetration and mitigation and those kinds of things that they didn't want to have a redundancy and just make a duplicate officer or a better version of an existing officer. So they decided, let's just make a new damage type, and then we can play around with mitigation and penetration for those. So when you look at the artifacts, ISO defense is higher than the damage. Yes, yes it is. So your ISO damage is going to split off that percentage, and then it's going to skip the standard mitigation, but it's going to run into the ISO mitigation and then get reduced. So if we had that 5 damage, it skipped everything right over the top, but then you ran into 50% ISO defense. Well, now it's down to 2.5. Now that 2.5 hits the shields. 80% of it gets absorbed by the shields. The other 0.5 goes through to the hull. So obviously it's going to take some time to source these things and get these mechanics rolling, but it's their way, it's their new standard that they're going to play around with probably for the next year or two, is this isolytic stuff. So the new artifacts are in the Voyager refinery as well. Awesome. So there's another way to source them through the Voyager refinery. Once you get the ship unlocked, which for some of us will be July 24th or 25th.